Welcome back to 28 Days and
The
Beyond.
show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Kharisma. Welcome back for part 2.
For part 2, we're here with the Africa family,
Yes.
Debbie Africa, Mike Jr., and Mike Sr.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
This time we wanted to sort of talk about how you came to, like, what are your personal stories within the Move family? How did you come to join Move and be a part of it? I guess we can begin with you.
Yes.
Well, I actually came because my relatives, some of my relatives came in, but it was on the tail end of being in a big fight with the neighborhood family around the corner. And it was just so, it was bizarre, really, but not to get into all that. But after the fight, because we were young, and I had 2 brothers that were younger and bad. They were only like about 12 or 10 and 12 or something like that. And my mother, being she was separated from her husband, and she was on her own raising 5 children, trying to raise 5 children to the best that she could on welfare. And she was just scared. After that big fight, it was a bad situation. People got hurt. It ended up being a court case and all that kind of stuff. And she just worried for our well-being. The summer was coming, and she just wanted to get us out the streets. So she just called them all her family relatives and wanted to know what she should do. So we had this almost like we had a lecture from her brothers that came over, and some people from the Move organization, and they came over and they were just lecturing us about violence and how it shouldn't be that way, and giving us a lot of information. At the time, we didn't know it was, as we term it, Move law now, but just letting us know how dangerous it was and how it just wasn't cool. And anyway, from there, her brother asked her, offered to take my brothers down to his place for the summer so that they could work, which is wash cars, help them with the dogs, help take care of the dogs, walk the dogs, because he kind of did that for a living, for making a little bit of money to make ends meet and pay rent and eat food and all. And so she took him up on it. Like, she was like, oh, yeah, please take him, because, like I said, my brothers were pretty bad. And they kind of like, started a lot of the fight. But the point is that it was their side that came to our house. And so from there, that's just how I got in Move. We just eventually, started going down, as they saw, headquarters or Pearl Street, which was the schoolhouse. And from there, we just started working and just never turned back.
How old were you at the time?
I was 16, almost 17, but I wanted to graduate high school first. So I was in high school and I did want to do that first. But after graduation, I did. I started coming down and coming around and really just understanding the principle and just bringing how true the principle is and how true, what I was hearing. And
that's what I was going to ask you, because it sounds like, or from what you've laid out, it seems like that could be a really stark contrast from the mainstream way of life. Was it difficult for you to adjust, or you kind of fit right in?
Actually, I kind of fit right in because I was still young and still impressionable. Okay. I didn't have a whole lot of, I was kind of square anyway. I wasn't one that just wanted to go to a wild party and go crazy and drink and things like that. I wasn't that kind of girl anyway. So it kind of like fit, with the things that I like to do.
Okay.
And
Mike Sr., how did you get involved?
Well, it was the opposite for me, and I was kind of wild, and the reason why I came down there was because she was my girlfriend, and I was following her.
I was wondering what that backstory was.
But at the time, I was in the Marines at the time, and seeing some of the things that they were talking about, some of the issues that Move had, when the people came up, Move people came up after the fight, she mentioned. I heard some of the information. I wasn't that interested in it because I wanted to do what I was doing, which was hanging out, drinking some, and being kind of wild. But seeing some of the incidents that was happening around there, seeing some of the confrontations, not just with Move, but with some of the things that was happening in the community. I became more and more interested in it. So being around it exposed me to animals, because I wasn't particularly fond of animals either. You know, so a lot of things I was learning from being down there, you know, and a lot of things about my health, you know, because they worked out all the time and that's incessantly, you know, so even caring for the animals, they was running the dogs around the blocks, and, you know, so yeah. So that's how I got introduced to it, you know.
So what was the sort of day-to-day life like? What were some of the things that you did?
Well, like I said, with the dogs, but we boxed all the time, and we washed cars, and just actually it was a really tranquil place, man. It was, you know, because it was offset from societal stuff. You know, wasn't a lot of, you know, confusion around there, man. So when you come down there, you might see somebody playing chess or something, sitting on a porch, you know, interacting with a dog, which, I mean, with this kind of stuff was really strange to me, man. You know, because I was more used to hanging out on a corner somewhere, you know, even, and the instant she's talking about, I was actually on leave. And
he actually broke up the fight, actually, and ran all the way to 42nd Street from 39th and Reno to get my mother out of church.
Wow.
yeah, so
To come back, and it was a bad episode, but you know, so yeah, like he said, we were boyfriend and girlfriend together, so we kind of came in together, but a lot of the activities we did mostly was just wash cars, because that was pretty much our income.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how we had the best car wash in town. We did it by hand. It was no automatics, and that's how we fed the dogs. That's how we fed the little bit of cats that we had around. That's how we fed the children. And outside of that, we just took care of the life that was there. We took care of the dogs. We ran him every day. He was one of the best runners of the dogs. Like, they have a reputation, him and my brother Chuck, and other
He
members
ran to
of
get
the
your mom at
organization.
church. Had to be some kind of shit.
Being in pretty good shape for
Yes,
that.
and here we are today.
Yeah.
40 years later, actually
So-
more than 40 years later.
Was the adjustment period for you as easy, Mike Sr.?
no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Because
So
of
because
just what I
of-
just
yeah,
named.
what
You
you
know,
said.
I didn't
Like,
want.
how long did you feel it took you before you felt like, okay, I can kind of relax into this new lifestyle and this new way of thinking?
No, it was a while.
Okay.
You know, and I was truthfully, I was back and forth.
Okay.
You know, I was back and forth with it, and I would hang with it for a while before I would, you know, go back and hang out with my brothers or something. You know, and then, you know, but seeing things and hearing things that was happening in the community, you know, made me feel compelled to come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
But you had to have some sort of interaction with the outside world,
Right.
whether it be through the car wash or, you know, what, like, it was not like you were, you know, stuck
No,
in
we
the
were
house.
No, we
isolated.
weren't
nowhere.
isolated.
Yeah,
No,
we were.
no,
We had a lot of contact with the outside world. Because we had to go to the store. And we
Yeah,
dealt
right.
with customers every day. We dealt
Right,
with
car
customers
wash.
every day.
Yeah.
You know, we dealt with vets. We dealt with people that we had to go supermarkets where we had to get our flea dip medicine from.
And we saw our
things like
families
that.
every
We saw our
day.
families
Yeah.
every day. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to put
Yeah.
my mind like that.
Trying to take
You
it
know,
all
especially in that time period, right? A
Mhm.
lot of the things, like we said, a lot of the things that we're talking about now are pretty commonplace. But back then, I mean, you know, you're having interaction with people, and how are they looking at you? How are they sort of treating you?
That's another episode, I guess.
Well, like I said, you know, with the hair, you know,
Yeah.
just going back into the neighborhood with locks.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, because they were longer than they are now.
Right.
But just, you know, just nappy hair as they saw it. You
Wow.
know, they thought I had lost my mind.
Yeah.
And they treated me like that, you know. And they
Wow.
wouldn't even, some of them wouldn't take the time to even listen to an explanation about why you were doing this, why
Yeah.
you were living like this. But they took no explanation from me when I was hanging on the corner drinking wine.
Right,
You know,
right,
that
right.
was just
That
normal.
was
Exactly.
normal.
That's-
'Cause that's what
You know, you
everybody
don't
was
have to
doing.
explain that,
Right,
you know.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that I'm running past them now, you know, and trying to be healthy and better myself, you know. That required, you know, some study.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, what's wrong with you, man?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
happened to you?
That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's
Well,
very
we
interesting.
definitely want to hear more about the personal stories from you because it's so intriguing.
Yeah.
But we're going to take a little bit of break, and we'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond right after this. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We are still here with Debbie, Mike Sr., Mike Jr., Africa, having this awesome conversation. Mike Jr., right before the break, we were talking to your mom and dad just kind of about their personal experiences being a part of MOVE. But we want to hear a little bit more from you and just growing up in MOVE in the community, especially with your mom and dad being in prison.
Yeah, being in MOVE, for me, was great. I mean, like I'm saying, like I was one of the few people who was born and moved and got a chance to see outside of move too. So I was born and moved, and because my mom and dad was in prison when I was born, and then I was raised by my grandmother and my aunts, right, and the move community. And my grandmother is who I lived with, and at one point she left the organization, and when she left, she took me with her because I was with her, right? And so I was, you know, I went to school and my hair was cut and just like everybody else.
Yeah.
So, and the things that my mom feared about, you know, the things in society, the things that she was worried about with her brothers, getting into trouble and crime, and that's exactly the life that I was starting to get into at a very young age.
Wow.
How young?
12 years old.
Same age as your brothers.
So, like her brother, I mean, those are my uncles, right? And living in the same house, around the same atmosphere, the same kind of people. So, my sister and I were in school. We get into a big fight. This girl attacked my sister. I stopped, you know, we got into a big fight. I'm jumping on her back and trying to stop this 6-foot woman from beating my sister up, right?
Wow.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
And as that whole thing happened, the police, they would not get involved to help. My grandmother, it was just a bad thing. So I talked to my mom on the phone after a thing that I got into with my grandmother, and they got into a conversation about me and move. And my grandmother, I remember her saying, "This boy needs some principle." And they were talking, and I don't know how it happened. It's blurry to me now, foggy to me now, but somehow it came up, me going back to move. And Ramona Africa was coming out of prison after the bombing whole thing. She did 7 years in prison. She was coming up home, and I'm seeing her on TV. And I asked Mom, I said, "You think Ramona will come and pick me up? Come and take me back?" You know, Mom said, "Yeah, I think she will." I said, you know, I'm seeing her on TV and all this coming home in the limousine and all this press on Geraldo Rivera show and all of these different news people. So I wasn't sure that she would actually come and get me, right? I mean, you know, would she have time for me, right? And the next day after she got out of prison, she came knocking on the door.
What?
Wow.
So wait, let's get this timeline. So you were born in '78, and you were 12. So this must have been around 1990.
92.
And when did you you know, when did your grandmother take you out of the organization to begin with?
I was in the 80s, mid 80s.
So okay, so you
So I was like 6 or 7.
old enough to remember,
when
but maybe
May 13th
not.
happened, I was like 6.
All right.
So when my grandmother, when they left, my grandmother, my aunts left the organization, I was, I guess, around somewhere around the same, about 5-ish.
Yeah. So you, by the time this conversation happened in '92, you were ready to get back into, like, you know, you were clear that that would have been a good move.
I was ready for a visit.
Okay.
Okay.
I was ready to do something different.
So you knew
Tired of
something
school,
wasn't. Yeah. Oh, I got
because
you.
the things that was happening in school wasn't getting any better. My sister got beat up by this girl that was 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And we were kids.
Yep.
And I was done with the fact that nobody would do anything to stop this.
Okay.
And I was disgruntled.
Yeah.
So
I was scared of the life that I might lead, you know, with my cousins into drugs and selling drugs and guns and all of that. I was terrified. I didn't really want anything to do with that.
So you went for a visit initially. When did it become something more?
When I got there, I said, "I remember this. This is great."
Oh, wow, it was like that.
I remember this.
Wow, that's what's up.
I forgot the smell of the houses.
Yeah.
Because Move has a distinct smell. When you go into the houses, you smell the food.
Yeah.
Because it's raw, it's natural, it's
yeah.
healthy, it's, you know, you smell the fruit, you smell the grain.
Yeah.
And I remember that smell. It was so familiar to me. And I'm like, oh, man. And I remember the hair. And then I remember feeling left out because I didn't have that anymore. The kids that I was growing up with, they still had their strength and they still had their understanding of Move beliefs. So I'm like, I lost that. I'm feeling this like
At 12 years old.
At 12 years old.
Yeah.
So then after we leave they dropped me back off at home, my grandmother's house.
But I'm fascinated by this because at 12 years old, at 13 years old, this is a time where people, you know, especially young boys, are looking for less structure, more freedom, right, to explore. And you're choosing to go back into that environment, right? Something you had mentioned, you know, your friends had the physical discipline, the mental discipline. They were familiar with the philosophy. That was something that was attractive to you.
Yeah, man. I mean, in Move, that's like our guiding light. Health and fitness is so important. And being able to speak our belief and teach people the truth. And they still had that intact within them.
Yeah.
And I felt robbed because this is something that I was born into that I'm supposed to have too.
Wow.
My parents are in Move and they've been in Move all my life. They weren't taken out.
Yeah.
So I felt cheated. So when I had the opportunity to like get back, I couldn't wait to get back around there and learn how to swim and learn how to run. I mean, I played football and I played basketball and we ran up and down the street and all that, but like these guys were out running miles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like they were running the dogs and the dogs would be tired when they were done. So they were so strong and so fit and so impressive to me. That was just like, I gotta get this back, you know. And I worked hard to like just, you know, do that. And my dad, like I heard about, he's always been my hero, right? And you know, so listen, like he sent me trophies from his accomplishments from prison, right? And I'm looking at these trophies that he sent me and these plaques that he sent me back. And this one plaque he sent me back, it says 36 miles running, right? He ran 36 miles in just in a couple of hours, right? Yeah. And so I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, this is what Move is all about. And I had the ability at one point to be fitted in with this, and I lost it because I was taken out. So I felt, at that point I made up my mind. This is it. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it back.
Okay.
And that's what I worked on.
Wow.
So at that point, did you move back into the house?
I did.
Okay.
Well, it was like back and forth for a while, for a couple of weeks and then months, and then eventually I was just like, all right, now I'm bringing my dresser over. It's over. My dad made my dresser. Yeah. There's a prison program where they can make furniture, and he made a dresser for me, and I had that. That's what my dresser. So I took that to the house, and then I started putting my clothes in that, and I never went back home.
Wow.
So now, there's another aspect of this. This organization, this family that you are so committed to, that seems to give you a sense of purpose. Your parents weren't physically there with you.
Right.
Did that, like, I mean, obviously having been, you said you were literally born in prison. This was your normal in some ways, but how could anybody ever get used to something like that?
You know, I don't know, man. To me, that was something that I never. It wasn't something like I had and lost to me. I never had it, so I was trying to just. I was waiting for it, and we always talked about what we're going to do when they get home, right, and how we're going to live and all this kind of stuff. That happened. That went on throughout the entire existence of them being in prison, right? But we never. It was just, that's just how it was. So we just lived and waited and worked at it, you know.
And in 2018, in June? And August?
October for him.
October,
okay.
That day finally came.
Yeah. We got pictures of it too. I remember going to get them.
Wow.
I went and got them both.
Oh, yes.
And that was the first time that y'all three had ever been together.
Yeah.
Ever in his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there any words?
No, it's speechless, man.
Yeah. What was the first thing you did?
Hugged.
I mean, you know.
Well, hugged and smiled, I'm sure. Lots of smiles,
lots of smiles, lots of hugs, lots of tears.
Wow.
Lots of feeling of completion, finality.
Relief.
Relief, yeah, all of that. You know, but there is a thing too of incompletion too, because although they are home, there are other people that didn't get home. So, you know, it's 2 down and 5 to go, you know.
Wow.
But I felt very, very relieved that they would be home. And one of the things that came over me was that when they take their final breath, it won't be in a prison.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
You know,
Well, we definitely want to.
I mean, this is something we'll have to pick up on next time on 28 Days and Beyond.
Where we talk about our heritage, our history, and our culture. We'll see you next time.